Under the fractured moon, a shadow slipped from the king's hearth like smoke from a dying fire. Elise Rowan trudged through the whispering pines, the weight of her exile settling heavier than the snowflakes that clung to her cloak. 3 years she had warmed the Alpha King's bed, not as mate or equal, but as a sanctioned balm, a distraction woven into the fabric of his endless campaigns. Corvin Ash, the strategist whose mind mapped wars like constellations, had needed her to function through the brutal winters of the northern realms. She had been his quiet harbor, her touch a fleeting anchor against the grief that gnawed at him since the loss of his true Luna, buried under ice and betrayal 5 years prior. But harbors erode, and Elisa had chosen to drift away without a word, slipping from the frost-laced towers of Eldridge Keep under the cover of a storm-swept night. Now, at 28, the Omega felt the bite of true solitude in the Iron Spine Mountains. The wind howled like distant wolves, carrying the metallic tang of impending snow and the faint, acrid scent of smoke from some far-off border skirmish. Her boots crunched over frozen earth, each step a deliberate severance from the life she had tolerated. Rejection had come not in shouts or decrees, but in the slow poison of indifference. Corvin's eyes glazing over her as if she were merely a tool dulled by use. She had seen it in the way he turned from her after their nights together, his broad shoulders rigid, his voice clipped with commands for scouts and generals. "Stay," he had once murmured, not in affection, but necessity, and she had until the necessity became her cage. The path wound upward toward the forsaken passes where outcasts like her vanished into legend. Elisa's breath fogged the air, her dark hair matted with frost beneath the hood of her woolen mantle. In her pocket, her fingers brushed the silver pendant, a simple crescent moon etched with runes of the old deity, an heirloom from her mother who had whispered of hidden gifts before the pack wars claimed her. It had been her one secret in the king's service, a cool weight against her skin that hummed faintly when the moon waxed full. Now it felt like a mocking talisman, promising resonance she had never truly heard. Exile was no dramatic banishment. Corvin had not pursued her, not yet. Word would spread through the packs. The Omega who fled the Alpha King's side, abandoning her role without honor or farewell. Whispers of treason might follow, painting her as the fracture in his unyielding rule. But Elise had tasted enough of his world, the grand halls echoing with the clamor of armored betas, the war councils where lives were bartered like winter pelts, the nights when Corvin's body sought hers with mechanical precision, his golden eyes distant, haunted by ghosts she could not banish. She had been his salve, not his salvation, and the realization had carved a hollow in her chest deeper than any blade. As dusk bled into the sky, painting the snow in hues of bruised purple, Elise crested a ridge and paused. Below stretched the valley of shattered oaths, a vast basin ringed by jagged peaks that clawed at the heavens. Legend spoke of it as a place where the deity's breath lingered, where lost souls confronted their truths under the unblinking eye of Selene. The wind tugged at her cloak, carrying the low, mournful ouivo of a lone wolf echoing from the tree line. Her heart pounded, a rhythm both fearful and defiant. What strength was there in fleeing? Mercy, perhaps, to herself, to spare Corvin the burden of her growing resentment, and to seek a life unscripted by his wars. She descended, the snow deepening to her ankles, then her knees. The cold seeped through her layers, numbing her fingers and toes, but it sharpened her senses. The crisp snap of branches underfoot, the distant rumble of an avalanche in the heights, the subtle shift in the air as if the mountain itself watched. Elise's mind wandered to the packs she had known in her youth, before Corvin's emissaries claimed her for the crown. Omegas like her were vessels, meant to soothe alphas through the rut's fire or the battle's aftermath. But she had always sensed something more, a pull toward the moon's cycles, a whisper in her blood that storms obeyed when she dreamed. Night fell swiftly, the moon rising like a silver wound in the velvet dark. Elise found shelter in a shallow cave, its mouth framed by icicles like frozen tears. She kindled a small fire with flint and tinder from her satchel, the flames dancing hungrily, casting flickering shadows on the rough stone walls. The warmth was fleeting, a fragile defiance against the encroaching freeze. As she huddled close, roasting a strip of dried venison, the pendant warmed against her chest. She drew it out, watching the moonlight fracture through its facets, and for the first time in days, doubt crept in like frost. Had she truly escaped, or merely traded one prison for another's chill embrace? Corvin's realm burned at its borders. Rumors of rival alphas testing his fractured lines had reached even the keep's inner chambers. Without her as his anchor, would he unravel? The thought stirred an unwelcome ache, a thread of connection she had tried to sever. Love, if it had ever bloomed there, was no fairy tale. It was the quiet endurance of her presence amid his storms. But endurance was not destiny. Outside, the wind rose to a wail, and in its midst, Elisa heard it, a faint, resonant hum from the pendant, syncing with the pulse of the night. The fire steadied, its flames leaping higher, untouched by the gusts that rattled the cave's entrance. Her breath caught. Was this the gift her mother had promised, stirring now in exile's silence, or merely the mountain's cruel illusion, luring her deeper into the wild? As the moon climbed, bathing the valley in ethereal light, Elise pressed the pendant to her lips. The choice loomed, vast and unyielding, to embrace the unknown or to turn back toward the king whose control she had shattered. In the fire's glow, her shadow stretched long, a silhouette of rebirth or ruin, and the night held its breath. The storm broke with a fury that shook the cave's icy teeth, hurling snow like shards of shattered oaths into the night. Elise bolted upright, the pendant's hum now an insistent thrum against her skin, syncing with the thunderous heartbeat echoing through the valley. The fire sputtered, its flames cowering as gusts clawed at the entrance. But she felt no chill, only a pull, ancient and unbidden, drawing her gaze to the darkness beyond the threshold. She rose, cloak pulled tight, and peered into the maelstrom. Shadows twisted in the moonlight's fractured beam, and then a shape emerged, a massive form staggering through the drifts, broad shoulders hunched against the gale. The scent hit her first. Blood, sharp and coppery, mingled with the musk of alpha fury and something deeper, like scorched earth after a lightning strike. Her instincts recoiled, omega senses flaring with the urge to flee or submit, but curiosity rooted her in place. Who would brave the iron spine in such a tempest, wounded and alone? He collapsed just beyond the cave's lip, a low growl rumbling from his chest as snow cascaded over him. Elise's breath hitched. Even cloaked in white and shadow, she knew him. Corvin Ash, the Alpha King, his silver-threaded fur mantle torn and bloodied, one arm clamped over a gash along his ribs. The strategist who had mapped empires with cold precision now knelt in the filth of the wild, his golden eyes, those eyes that had once skimmed over her like a battlefield report, lifting to meet hers. They burned with recognition, raw and unguarded, stripping away the layers of crown and command. "You," he rasped, voice gravel over frost, pushing himself up on a blood-smeared hand. The wind whipped his dark hair across a face etched with fresh scars, the old ones from border wars paling beside the exhaustion that hollowed his cheeks. He was no longer the unyielding monarch of Eldridge Keep. Here he was a beast cornered by his own unraveling. Elise stepped back, heart slamming against her ribs like a war drum. Fear coiled in her gut, not of his strength, which could crush her with a thought, but of the instinctive tether that snapped taut between them. It was the Omega's curse that pulled toward an Alpha's dominance, amplified by 3 years of shared nights where her body had learned his rhythms. But this was no rut's haze. It was sharper, laced with the moon's silver call, her pendant vibrating as if echoing his labored breaths. She denied it, shoving the warmth away. He was the cage she had fled, the king who had used her as a whetstone for his grief, not a man deserving her aid. "Leave," she whispered, though her voice trembled, betraying the curiosity that flickered like embers in her chest. Why was he here? The borders burned, or so the rumors went, rival packs sensing weakness in his fractured court. Had her departure cracked the dam? She edged toward the fire, fingers itching for the knife at her belt, but her eyes traced the crimson trail staining the snow behind him. Blood under the moon, a symbol as old as the deity's first howl, binding hunter and hunted in unwitting alliance. Corvin staggered forward, ignoring her command, his frame filling the cave's mouth like a storm cloud. Pain twisted his features, but his gaze held hers, probing, as if mapping the contours of her resolve. Elise. Her name on his lips was a wound reopened, carrying the weight of unspoken accusations. He collapsed against the wall, breath ragged, the metallic tang of his blood thickening the air. Up close, the gash wept freely, fabric rent by claw or blade. Pursuers, perhaps, from the skirmishes she had left behind. She should let him bleed out, let the wild claim what the keep had not. But the pendant burned hot now, a lunar pulse syncing with the alpha's fading rhythm, and the cave seemed to narrow, the fire leaping as if fed by an unseen wind. Curiosity won, a treacherous spark amid the fear. Kneeling at a distance, she tore a strip from her own cloak, dipping it in the snowmelt by the flames. "Who hunts you?" she asked, voice steadying as she pressed the makeshift bandage to his side. His skin was fever-hot beneath the chill, muscles tensing under her touch, a reminder of nights when that heat had sought solace in her, mechanical and merciful. "Traitors," he muttered, wincing but not pulling away. His eyes, those golden depths, softened fractionally, the melancholy that had always shadowed him surfacing like thaw beneath ice. "The council. They whisper of my weakness since you—" He cut off, jaw clenching, as if the admission cost him a kingdom. The connection hummed between them, instinctive and denied, her omega essence soothing the alpha's rage, a balm he had once relied upon without gratitude. Now, in this forsaken hollow, it felt like a curse, stirring memories of her hands on his scars, her whispers lost in the roar of his campaigns. Elise withdrew her hand, the blood staining her fingers a stark red against the pale cave stone. Fear twisted with an unwelcome empathy. Had her flight ignited this chaos? The wind outside howled in mockery, Weavos distant yet closing, and she glanced at the entrance, senses prickling. "You think I owe you this, after treating me like a shadow in your war machine?" Her words cut, born of 3 years' resentment, but curiosity lingered in the way she watched him, searching for the man beneath the king. Corvin's laugh was bitter, a sound swallowed by the gale. "I never claimed you owed me anything. You were necessary, until you weren't." His gaze dropped to the pendant, now glowing faintly in the firelight, and something like awe flickered in his eyes, recognition of a power he had overlooked. The air thickened, charged with the moon's breath, as if the deity herself leaned in to witness their fragile truce. She turned away, stoking the fire to ward off the encroaching cold, but the bond tugged, undeniable. In the silence broken only by crackling flames and his steadying breaths, Elisa felt the first threads of a refuge forming, not safety, but a shared peril that demanded they face the storm together. The night deepened, the moon casting long shadows that danced like fates entwined, and outside, the Weavos grew nearer, a chorus of pursuit closing in. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's shadows deepened as the weavos swelled into a savage chorus, slicing through the storm's roar like claws on bone. Elise's pulse thrummed in her ears, syncing with the pendant's insistent glow, a silver beacon against the fire's dying embers. Corvin shifted beside her, his breath steadying under the crude bandage, but his golden eyes sharpened, scanning the entrance with the instincts of a king who had outmaneuvered death 1,000 times. The air thickened with the scent of pursuit, wet fur, iron resolve, and the faint rot of betrayal that clung to those who turned on their own. She pressed against the rough stone wall, the cold seeping into her spine like forgotten regrets. Fear coiled tight in her chest, not just for the hunters closing in, but for the alpha at her side. His presence a gravitational pull, she fought with every ragged inhale. 3 years of being his distraction had etched their scents into her skin, his like storm-tossed pine and smoldering hearth, hers a subtle wildflower crushed under boot. Now, in this hollow refuge, that mingling felt like a chain reforged, binding her to the very man she had fled. Empathy stirred unbidden, a treacherous warmth amid the chill. He was wounded, stripped of his crown's armor, and for the first time she saw the fractures in his unyielding facade. Not the strategist, but a soul adrift in guilt's endless winter. "Their council betas," Corvin murmured, voice low and edged with frost, as he tested his ribs with a grimace. Blood seeped anew through the cloth, dark rivulets tracing the cave floor like veins of spilled secrets. Loyal to the whispers. They struck at the pass, claiming my instability endangers the realm. His gaze flicked to her, heavy with unspoken blame, yet laced with a vulnerability that cracked her resolve. Instability, her doing? The word hung between them, a blade unsheathed, forcing her to confront the chaos her absence had unleashed. Borders aflame, packs fracturing, she had been his anchor, however illusory. And now the realm paid the price. Elisa swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat, the metallic tang mirroring his wound. "And you came for me? To drag me back as your fix?" Her words lashed out, born of resentment's embers, but curiosity tempered them. Why pursue her into this forsaken wild when armies awaited his command? The pendant hummed louder, its vibration traveling up her arm, resonating with the distant thunder of paws on snow. Outside, the storm's fury masked the encroaching steps, but she felt them. 5, perhaps 6, their sense a foul brew of ambition and fear. Corvin's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not harshly, but with the desperate clasp of a drowning man. His touch ignited memories. Nights in the keep's shadowed alcoves, where his body had sought hers not in passion, but in mechanical release from grief's vice. She had endured, offering mercy he never named, but now his fingers trembled, the alpha's strength yielding to something rawer. Not to drag, to understand. The admission cost him, his jaw tightening as pain flared in his side. Empathy bloomed then, fragile as the fire's last sparks. A recognition that his control, that iron crown, had been as much a prison for him as her role had been for her. He was no longer the distant king. Here, bleeding under the moon's indifferent gaze, he was marked by the same exile, guilt for a lost Luna, shame for leaning on a distraction like a crutch. The first howl pierced the gale, close now, echoing off the peaks like a judgment from the deity herself. Elisa yanked free, scrambling for her satchel, heart pounding with a mix of terror and resolve. The cave offered scant defense, its mouth a funnel for the wind, its depths a labyrinth of jagged stone. But the pendant's pulse quickened, urging her forward. She snatched a burning branch from the fire, flames licking the air with defiant hunger, and thrust it toward the entrance. "We fight together, or you die here alone," she said, voice steady despite the quake in her limbs. It was no declaration of loyalty, but a pragmatic tether. their fates entwined by the blood on the snow, the moon's silver thread weaving through the chaos. Corvin rose unsteadily, drawing a dagger from his boot, its blade etched with the ash crest, dulled by recent use. His eyes met hers, golden fire meeting her storm-gray resolve, and in that instant the instinctive bond flared. Omega soothing Alpha, not in submission, but in shared defiance. He nodded, a ghost of his strategist's smile ghosting his lips. Together, then. They positioned themselves at the threshold, back to back, the cave's chill forgotten in the heat of impending clash. The wind carried snippets of snarls, barks of command, the crunch of boots breaching the drifts, and Elise's senses heightened, the pendant now a living heartbeat against her chest. The first pursuer lunged from the white veil, a beta cloaked in gray steel, eyes wild with the thrill of the hunt. Elise swung the torch, flames roaring as they met fur and flesh, eliciting a yelp that dissolved into the storm. Corvin struck beside her, his dagger finding the second attacker's throat in a spray of crimson that painted the snow like a ritual offering. Blood under the moon, warm and viscous, steamed in the cold. It sent a primal call that stirred the air between them. She felt his presence at her flank, solid and unyielding, his growls syncing with her breaths, a rhythm born of necessity, yet blooming into something deeper, an empathy forged in the crucible of survival. Another beta circled, feinting left before slashing right. Elise dodged, the pendant's hum surging through her veins like liquid silver. Without thought, she extended her hand toward the storm, willing the wild's fury to bend. The wind answered, a sudden gust hurling snow and ice into the attacker's face, blinding him long enough for Corvin to finish the strike. Surprise flickered in the king's eyes as he glanced at her, the glow of her gift illuminating the cave's gloom. Not just a distraction, then. A force he had never truly seen. The skirmish blurred into a visceral dance, claws raking stone, flames hissing against wet hides, weavos turning to gurgles of defeat. Elise's arms ached, her cloak torn, but the bond solidified with each parry, his protective stance shielding her from a flank, her intuitive pull drawing his strikes true. Empathy transformed in the melee's heat. She glimpsed the weight he carried, the guilt that had armored his heart against her, and he, perhaps, felt the quiet strength she had always possessed, overlooked in his campaign's shadow. The last beta fell, body crumpling into the drifts, the storm swallowing the echoes of battle. Panting, they retreated deeper into the cave, the fire rekindled from embers to ward off the blood's chill. Corvin slumped against the wall, his wounds reopened but stanched, while Elise bandaged them with trembling hands. Silence fell, broken only by the wind's mournful sigh and the distant fade of pursuit. Her fingers lingered on his skin, tracing scars old and new, and for the first time, he did not pull away. The pendant cooled, its light dimming, but the connection lingered, a fragile refuge amid the ruins, where fear had yielded to a bond unspoken yet undeniable. In the moon's watchful glow, Elise wondered if this was redemption's first whisper. Not possession, but choice, born from the blood they had spilled together. Yet doubt shadowed the warmth. Could she trust the king who had once reduced her to a tool? The night pressed in, heavy with possibilities, and her heart, bruised but unbroken, yearned toward the unknown dawn. The cave's depths exhaled a damp chill as dawn's first pallor seeped through the cracks, painting the bloodied stone in muted grays. Elise's hands still trembled from the night's frenzy, the metallic residue of battle clinging to her skin like a second shadow. She sat cross-legged by the rekindled fire, its flames now a subdued murmur, casting wavering light on Corvin's form, slumped against the opposite wall. His chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, the bandages she had bound over his ribs darkened with fresh seepage, but the fever that had gripped him in the storm's wake seemed to ebb, leaving his golden eyes half-lidded in wary repose. She traced the pendant's curve with her thumb, its silver surface cool now, as if the night's exertions had sated its lunar hunger. The skirmish had awakened something in her, a resonance that hummed faintly in her veins, echoing the moon's distant pull. Not just survival's instinct, but a deeper current, like the deity's breath stirring the wild's hidden veins. Her mother's whispers resurfaced in the quiet. The moon chooses its echoes, child, to still the tempests of the heart and pack. Elise had dismissed them as folklore, a balm for an Omega's overlooked life. Yet here, in exile's raw embrace, the pendant felt alive, its runes faintly etched with a glow that mirrored the ember's fade. Corvin stirred, a low groan escaping his lips as he shifted, wincing against the pull of torn muscle. His gaze found hers across the fire, probing with that strategist's intensity, now softened by pain's unmasking. No crown adorned him here, no armored betas at his flanks, just the man, marked by scars that mapped a lifetime of calculated losses. The deepest, she knew, from the Luna whose grave he had never visited, her betrayal a specter that had driven him to wield Elisa as mere distraction. Empathy flickered in her chest, uninvited, mingling with the resentment that still simmered like banked coals. He had come for her, not in conquest, but unraveling, a king fractured by the void she had left. "The storm quiets," he murmured, voice rough as gravel under boot, glancing toward the entrance where the wind's wail had dulled to a sigh. Snowflakes drifted lazily now, catching the weak light like scattered diamonds. "You're doing?" Doubt laced his words, but curiosity burned brighter, drawing him upright despite the grimace that twisted his features. Blood flecked his lips from an inner wound, a crimson bead that he wiped away with the back of his hand, leaving a smear like war paint. Elisa hesitated, the fire's warmth a fragile barrier between them. The bond from the fight lingered, a subtle tether in the air, her Omega essence easing the edges of his alpha tension, his presence stirring her blood with unwelcome familiarity. She had felt it during the clash, the pendant's surge channeling through her, bending the gale to shield them, hurling ice like the deity's judgment. Not magic of spells, but resonance, a harmony with the moon's cycles that her exile had finally unchained. "Perhaps," she replied, voice steady but laced with the ache of revelation. "It calls to me now, stills what rages." He leaned forward, ignoring the fresh bloom of red on his bandage, his eyes narrowing on the pendant nestled against her collarbone. The firelight danced across its surface, igniting the runes in a brief, ethereal shimmer. Corvin's breath caught, a rare crack in his composure, as if he witnessed a map unfolding before him, one he had overlooked in his campaign's blind march. "Lunar resonance," he whispered, the words heavy with recognition, drawn from ancient tomes in Eldridge's forbidden archives. Legends of Omegas who wove the moon's will into tempests, soothing fractured packs or summoning gales to shatter foes. Gifts buried by wars and hierarchies, dismissed as myth until desperation unearthed them. "Your mother, the Rowan line, I should have seen it." The admission hung between them, a bridge over the chasm of their shared past. Elise's heart clenched, the weight of 3 years crashing back, nights when he had turned to her not for her soul, but her body's quiet mercy, rationalizing her as a tool to blunt grief's edge. Now, stripped of his throne's illusions, he saw her truly, a key to destinies he had long mapped alone. But revelation brought no triumph, only a deeper sorrow, the fire's crackle underscoring the fragility of this moment. The cave felt smaller, the air charged with the scent of healing blood and smoldering pine. The distant uivo of lingering wolves, a reminder that refugee was fleeting. She rose, drawn by the pendant's subtle thrum, and approached him, kneeling to inspect the wound. Her fingers hovered, then pressed gently, channeling the resonance instinctively. A soft hum filled the space, vibrating from her core to his skin, and Corvin inhaled sharply as the bleeding slowed, the inflamed flesh cooling under her touch. Pain ebbed from his features, replaced by awe that bordered on reverence. The melancholy king, ethical to his core, yet haunted by duties that had cost him everything, now glimpsing redemption in an Omega he had undervalued. "You could mend more than flesh," he said, voice thick with the gravity of realization. "The borders fracture because my control falters, without anchor, without you. But this gift, it could still the packs, bind them under the moon's truth. You're no distraction, Elise. You're the deity's echo, the pathfinder to heal what I've broken." Tears pricked her eyes, hot against the cave's chill, as the weight settled. Her power, once a secret whisper, now a beacon that tied her inexorably to his fate. Not as salve, but as equal in the dance of destiny versus choice. The bond deepened, empathy blooming into something perilously close to understanding. His guilt a mirror to her rejection's scars, both forged in the fire of unchosen roles. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow in her chest. Could she wield this for a realm that had cast her aside? For a king who must first surrender his iron grasp? Outside, the snow fell softer, the moon's influence waning with the rising sun, but the revelation echoed in the silence, a turning point where blood and fire yielded to silver light. Elise withdrew her hand, the pendant dimming, and met his gaze, the air between them alive with unspoken possibilities. The wild waited, and with it, the confrontation of truths long buried. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your. The sun clawed its way over the iron-spined peaks, bleeding pale gold across the valley's frost-kissed expanse. But the light offered no warmth to the cave's shadowed heart. Elise stood at the threshold, the pendant heavy against her chest like a judgment unspoken, its silver curve catching the dawn's reluctant gleam. The revelation from the night lingered in her veins, a current of lunar power that had stilled Corvin's wounds and bent the storm to her will. But it brought no peace, only the sharp edge of foreboding. Her gift, once a buried whisper, now thrummed with purpose, tying her to the fractured realm she had fled. Freedom tasted like ash in her mouth. The wild's embrace felt less like liberation and more like a prelude to reckoning. Corvin rose behind her, movements deliberate despite the pallor etching his features, the bandages stark white against his skin. Blood from the skirmish had crusted the cave floor in dark veins, a map of their fragile alliance, and the air still carried the faint, acrid bite of scorched fur from the fallen betas. His golden eyes, shadowed by the weight of sleepless command, fixed on the horizon where smoke curled from distant ridges. Signals from the burning borders, harbingers of the chaos her absence had unleashed. "They come," he said, voice a low rumble like thunder trapped in stone, laced with the melancholy that had always defined him. Not triumph in his tone, but duty's inexorable pull, the ethical core that had driven him to conquer grief through strategy, never surrender. She turned, meeting his gaze, the bond between them a taut thread humming with unresolved tension. Empathy warred with resentment in her chest. The man before her was no longer the distant king who had rationalized her as a tool, but a soul stripped bare, his guilt a mirror to her scars of rejection. Yet the pull toward him felt like chains reforged, her Omega instincts urging solace even as her heart screamed for autonomy. "Your counsel? Or the rival's sniffing weakness?" Her words cut the silence, born of the curiosity that had rooted her here, tending his wounds instead of fleeing into the dawn. He stepped closer, the scent of him, pine and iron, now mingled with healing blood, enveloping her like a winter fog. "Both. Lord Draven, my brother's shadow, leads the traitors. He claims the throne by right of blood, whispering that my distractions have weakened the ash line." His jaw tightened, a flicker of old pain surfacing. the brother lost to betrayal years ago, whose ambition had poisoned the pack's heart. Corvin's hand brushed the dagger at his belt, its hilt worn from countless judgments, but his eyes held no fire of vengeance, only the somber resolve of a king who weighed lives like scales. They march from the eastern passes with rival alphas at their flanks. The Matilha fractures. Without unity, the realm falls. Elise's breath caught, the pendant warming as if sensing the storm of fates converging. Visions flickered in her mind, unbidden echoes from the lunar resonance, packs tearing at one another under a blood moon, borders aflame with the red of spilled oaths. Draven's silhouette, gaunt and feral, crowned in stolen gold. Her gift stirred deeper now, not just to still tempests, but to reveal truths hidden in the wild's breath. She saw the Matilha's heart, wounded by years of Corvin's iron rule, yearning for a softer hand or a tyrant's grasp, freedom or love. The choice loomed, a moral precipice where forgiveness might mend what war would shatter. And me? Am I to be your weapon now, as I was your salve? Her voice trembled, the cave's chill amplifying the ache in her words, the wind outside whispering through the pines like the deity's indifferent sigh. Corvin's expression fractured, guilt etching deeper lines across his brow, the melancholic weight of his losses pressing down. He had buried his true Luna's betrayal beneath campaigns, using Elise to blunt the edges without ever offering her the redemption of true sight. Now, in this raw light, he extended a hand, not in command, but plea. No weapon, a choice, the resonance in you. It could call the packs home, bind them not by force, but by the moon's mercy. Draven offers war, I offer atonement, but only if you will it. His touch on her arm was feather-light, sending a shiver through her, the heat of alpha skin against her cold resolve, stirring memories of nights where she had chosen endurance over escape. The distant thunder of hooves shattered the moment, vibrating through the stone like the pack's collective roar. Elise pulled away, heart pounding with visceral fear, the air thickening with the musk of approaching foes. They spilled from the tree line below, Draven's betas, armored in steel etched with rival crests, their eyes gleaming with the hunger of traitors. At their head rode Lord Draven himself, his frame lean and shadowed, a scar twisting his lip into a perpetual sneer, the mark of a duel with Corvin that had claimed his eye, leaving a milky void. Banners snapped in the wind, crimson against the snow, symbols of the ash betrayal reborn. Weavos rose, a cacophony that clawed at her senses, mingling with the fire's dying crackle in the cave. Corvin drew his dagger, positioning himself between her and the entrance, his body a shield forged from duty's unyielding steel. "Stay behind," he growled, but his voice cracked with the ethical torment of it. Protecting her meant risking the realm's last hope. Elise's pendant blazed, the resonance surging like a tidal wave, flooding her with the pack's fractured emotions, loyalty twisted by fear, ambition devouring compassion. She stepped forward, hand outstretched, the moon's echo channeling through her veins. The wind obeyed, whipping snow into a blinding veil that halted the advance, horses rearing as gales howled like spectral guardians. Draven dismounted, his laugh a jagged bark cutting through the tumult. Brother's ghost and his Omega whore, how fitting in this pit of exiles. His words lashed like claws, evoking the Matilha's old wounds, the Luna's death, pinned on Corvin's neglect. Elise's role, whispered as the cause of his unraveling. The betas snarled, circling closer, their breaths fogging the air with the promise of blood. Elise's voice rose, amplified by the resonance, a silver thread weaving through the storm. Enough. The deity sees your betrayals, Draven, power seized in shadows, packs bled for your crown. The words carried weight, stirring doubt in the beta's ranks, some faltering as lunar truth pierced their resolve. Corvin glanced back, awe mingling with desperation in his eyes, the bond between them igniting into something profound. Not possession, but partnership in the face of ruin. Draven lunged, blade flashing, but the wind hurled him back, snow and ice forming a barrier like frozen oaths. The confrontation escalated, blades clashing against gusts, weavos drowned in the gale's fury. Elise channeled the gift, her body trembling with the effort, revealing flashes of truth to the wavering betas, Draven's secret pacts with rival alphas, his ambition a poison devouring the Matilha's soul. One by one, they turned, weapons lowering as empathy cracked their armored hearts. Corvin struck true, disarming his old foe with a precision born of sorrow, not rage. Draven fell to his knees in the snow, blood blooming dark on white, his milky eye fixed on Elisa with hateful clarity. Mercy or death, Corvin demanded, dagger poised, the ethical dilemma etching his face, the choice between vengeance for the past and forgiveness for the future. Elise met his gaze, the pendant's light fading as exhaustion claimed her. Love or freedom, to forgive meant binding herself to him, to the realm's mending. War would grant her exiles solitude, but doom them all. Mercy, she whispered, the word a spiritual anchor amid the bloodied drifts, for the Pax, not for him. Corvin nodded, sheathing the blade, but the weight of her choice hung between them. A moral victory laced with the pain of surrender, the moon's silver promise demanding they rebuild from ruins. As the wind died to a hush, the defeated betas knelt, the Matilha's fracture beginning to heal under the dawn's unforgiving light. Yet in Elise's heart, the dilemma lingered. Had she chosen love's redemption or merely delayed the war within? The snow fell anew, veiling the blood in white, and the path ahead stretched shadowed with trials yet to come. The valley's hush deepened as the snow began to veil the crimson stains, each flake a silent absolution falling from the indifferent sky. Elise's limbs ached with the residue of the resonance, her body a hollow vessel drained by the moon's borrowed fury. The pendant rested cool against her skin now, its glow faded to a mere whisper, as if the deity had withdrawn her breath to let mortal choices unfold. Around them, the betas knelt in the drifts, their weapons discarded like shed illusions, eyes downcast in the face of truths unveiled. Draven lay bound at Corvin's feet, his breaths ragged and defiant, the scar across his face a twisted map of ambitions thwarted. Yet victory tasted hollow in Elise's mouth, like blood swallowed back, a fragile truce forged in mercy, but shadowed by the fractures it could not mend. She stepped away from the gathering, the cold wind tugging at her torn cloak, carrying the faint coppery echo of the skirmish. Her heart pounded with a rhythm both triumphant and tormented, the ethical weight of her command pressing like an unseen crown. Mercy for the Pax, she had decreed, sparing Draven's life not from weakness, but from the deeper conviction that vengeance would only cycle the blood debt eternally. The betas turning had been her doing, the lunar echo piercing their doubts, revealing Draven's pacts with southern rivals, his whispers that painted Corvin as the realm's ruin. But in saving them, had she bound herself tighter to this world? Freedom, once a solitary path through the pines, now stretched entwined with the Alpha at her side, his presence a gravitational force she could no longer deny. Corvin approached, his boots crunching softly over the fresh powder, the dagger sheathed, but his hand lingering near its hilt, a habit of the strategist, ever vigilant against the wild's deceit. His golden eyes, softened by exhaustion's veil, searched hers with an intensity that stripped away the cave's lingering chill. Blood flecked his armor, not his own this time, and the melancholy that had always etched his features deepened, carved by the moral precipice they had just navigated. "You chose wisely," he said, voice a low timbre like wind through ancient boughs, laced with the guilt that had driven him into exile's maw. Ethical to his core, he had restrained the killing blow at her word, honoring the compassion he had long rationalized away in her presence. Yet doubt flickered in his gaze, mirroring her own. Had mercy crowned them, or merely postponed the fall? Elise turned toward the horizon, where the smoke from border fires smoldered like dying stars, the iron spine's jagged teeth biting into the paling sky. The air hummed with the pack's subdued murmurs, betas rising to bind their former lord, their uivos muted to whimpers of rediscovered loyalty. Her gift had stilled more than the storm. It had echoed the deity's judgment, soothing the Matilha's wounded heart with visions of unity lost. But the resonance pulled at her now, a subtle ache in her chest, revealing flashes of the realm's deeper wounds. Packs, scattered by years of Corvin's unyielding campaigns, omegas like her, silenced in the shadow of alpha decrees, the Luna's ghost, a specter fueling endless distrust. Wisely, she echoed, her breath fogging the air, tasting the salt of unshed tears. Or merely delayed the inevitable. Your rule broke them long before I walked away. He halted beside her, close enough that his warmth pierced the frost, a sensory reminder of nights when that heat had sought her not in love, but necessity, a distraction to blunt the grief of betrayal. The bond thrummed between them, instinctive yet resisted, her omega essence easing the tension in his frame, even as resentment coiled in her gut. Corvin's hand rose, hesitating before resting on her shoulder, the touch featherlight, seeking permission in the ruins of their shared trial. My rule, my control, he admitted, the words heavy as forged iron, his voice cracking with the raw edge of confession. I buried the pain of her loss, Ilara's betrayal, the packs torn in her wake, beneath strategies and borders. You were my anchor then, Elise, though I never named it so. Without you, I lost the thread that held me ethical. The fractures are mine to mend, but your gift? It shows the path. The pendant warmed faintly, syncing with the distant pulse of the Matilha gathering below, their scents mingling in the wind, fear yielding to tentative hope, like wildflowers piercing winter's crust. Elise's mind flooded with unbidden resonance, echoes of the pack's souls, yearning for a leader who chose compassion over conquest, a union that transcended hierarchy. She saw Corvin not as the distant king, but the man marked by duty's scars, melancholy, guilt-ridden, his ethical heart warring with the crown's demands. Empathy bloomed unresisted now, a tender ache amid the tragedy, transforming the resentment of 3 years into understanding's fragile bridge. Yet the choice loomed, spiritual and visceral, to embrace this redemption, sacrificing her exile's solitude for the realm's healing, or to walk away, granting him freedom to face his ruins alone, even if it doomed them both to despair. Draven's snarl cut through the moment, dragged to his knees by loyal betas, his milky eye fixed on them with venomous clarity. Mercy from a whore and a broken king? The deity laughs at your delusions. The betas tensed, claws flexing, but Elise raised a hand, the resonance flaring once more, a silver wave that silenced him, forcing visions of his own betrayals into his mind. The brother's death by his ambition, the packs bled for a throne unearned. He crumpled, not in death, but humbled defeat, the moral weight crushing his defiance. The act drained her further, knees buckling into the snow, but Corvin caught her, his arms encircling with a gentleness born of newfound reverence. In that embrace, the world narrowed to the heat of his body against the cold, the steady thrum of his heart echoing her own. Blood and fire had tested them, now under the moon's waning gaze. Union whispered as the true Renascimento, not immediate passion, but a deliberate weaving of souls. I surrender it, Corvin murmured into her hair, his breath warm against her temple, the confession a spiritual unburdening. The control, the crown's illusions. Choose me, Elise, not as salve, but as equal. Or go, and let me rebuild alone. His words hung like mist, the ethical dilemma laid bare. Love as proof, demanding her free will, not possession. Tears traced her cheeks, freezing in the chill, as the pendant pulsed with the deity's affirming light. The Pax watched from the valley, their weavos rising in a chorus of potential rebirth, the wind carrying scents of pine and promise. Elisa leaned into him, the resistance crumbling like thawing ice, but doubt lingered, a spiritual shadow questioning if this union would heal or merely mask deeper wounds. The sun climbed higher, gilding the snow in gold, and in the fragile dawn, their fates teetered on the edge of sacrifice, the moon's echo urging her toward a choice that could crown them both in redemption's light, or shatter them eternally. The dawn's gold fractured across the snow-veiled valley, casting elongated shadows that danced like hesitant spirits over the kneeling betas, their breaths fogging the air in ragged unison. Elise lingered in Corvin's embrace, the solidity of his frame a counterpoint to the tremor in her limbs. His scent, pine laced with the faint iron of healed wounds, enveloping her like a shroud woven from their shared trials. The pendant at her throat pulsed faintly, its silver warmth a lingering echo of the resonance that had bent the storm and unraveled Draven's web of deceit. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, but beneath it stirred a deeper current, the raw ache of choice, where freedom's solitude clashed with the pull of union, each path etched in the blood and fire that had forged them anew. She drew back slightly, her gray eyes searching his golden ones, finding there not the strategist's calculated gaze, but a vulnerability stripped bare by the night's confessions. Corvin's hand remained on her arm, steady yet unclaiming, the ethical weight of his surrender evident in the subtle tension of his jaw. The melancholy king who had wielded control as armor against grief, now offering it up like a blade to the forge. The pack stirred below, their weavos softening to murmurs of tentative allegiance, scents of damp fur and crushed pine rising on the wind, mingling with the crisp bite of fresh fallen snow. Draven, bound and silenced by the resonance's final vision, lay slumped in the drifts, his form a dark stain against the white, his ambition humbled but not extinguished, a living reminder that mercy demanded vigilance. "Elise," Corvin whispered, his voice a gravelly thread woven through the morning's hush, carrying the spiritual gravity of a vow unmade. "The realm hangs on this precipice. My past, Alara's shadow, the borders I scarred with endless campaigns, has poisoned the Matilha's heart. Your gift reveals it, Pax yearning for compassion over conquest, for a leader who chooses healing over dominion." His fingers traced the pendant's edge, not possessively, but with reverence, as if touching the moon's own verdict. The touch ignited a shiver through her, memories flooding unbidden. 3 years of nights where her body had been his refuge, rationalized as distraction, her omega essence soothing the alpha's unspoken torment without reciprocity. Now, in this gilded light, that history transformed, not erased, but redeemed through the lens of mutual sight. Her heart clenched, the wind whispering across her skin like the deity's cool breath, carrying distant echoes of the iron spine's eternal vigil. The resonance hummed within her, not as command, but invitation, a lunar symphony syncing with the pack's collective pulse, soothing the fractures she had glimpsed. Omegas silenced in shadowed halls, betas torn between loyalty and despair, alphas like Corvin burdened by guilt's unyielding crown. Freedom tempted her still, a solitary trail vanishing into the pines where she could nurture her gift unbound by throne or tether. Yet love, resisted and rationalized for so long, bloomed now as proof, not a reward for endurance, but a deliberate rebirth demanding sacrifice from them both. To walk away would grant her liberty, but doom the realm to Draven's lingering venom, the border's flames consuming all in unchecked war. To choose him meant yielding her exile's isolation, weaving her resonance into the Matilha's mending, but only if he relinquished the control that had once reduced her to salve. Tears traced frozen paths down her cheeks, the salt mingling with the chill that numbed her lips. "You've lost control once," she said. Voice steady, despite the visceral storm within, her breath visible in the crisp air. "Surrender it fully, not to me, but to this." She pressed her palm over his heart, feeling the steady thrum beneath scarred flesh, the ethical core that had always guided him, now laid bare. The pendant flared briefly, channeling a wave of silver light that rippled outward, touching the betas below. They rose as one, eyes lifting with newfound clarity, huevos rising in harmonious affirmation. The wind stilled, snowflakes suspending mid-fall like stars caught in the deity's paws, the valley transforming into a temple of ice and light. White gelido yielding to the red of healed wounds, Cinza Asso of armor gleaming with prateado reflections. Corvin's eyes widened, awe etching his features as the resonance bound the packs not in fear, but empathy, a spiritual union where power bowed to compassion. He knelt then, not in dominance, but equality, his broad form folding into the snow beside her, the crown's weight symbolized in the dagger he drew and offered hilt first. "I choose you freely," he murmured, the words a renascimento etched in the morning's gold. His melancholy lifting like mist burned away. "As partner, as pathfinder, the throne is yours to share or forsake. Heal with me, or let me stand alone in the ruins I wrought." Blood from the night's clash steamed faintly in the warming air, a sacrificial offering under the fading moon's watchful eye, its light fracturing across his upturned face like divine approval. Elise's resolve crystallized, the choice no longer dilemma, but destiny claimed. Love as redemption's forge, tempering their scars into strength. She accepted the dagger, its weight light in her hand, and drew him up, their fingers intertwining in a bond, visceral and eternal. The packs encircled them, sense blending in unity. Wildflower and storm, Omega and Alpha, rejection reborn as alliance. She channeled the resonance one final time, a soothing hum that spread through the valley, stilling the last embers of discord, mending the Matilha's spirit with threads of lunar mercy. Exhaustion claimed her then, but in Corvin's arms, it felt like a scent, the fire of their union kindling against despair's winter. As the sun crested fully, bathing the iron spine in radiant warmth, the snow began to melt in rivulets of promise, washing clean the bloodied earth. Elise leaned into him, the pendant cooling to a gentle pulse, their shadows merging into one, a silhouette of sacrifice and cure, where freedom and love converged, not in conquest, but quiet triumph. The deity's breath sighed through the pines, affirming the rebirth. From distraction to destiny, guilt to grace, the realm rising phoenix-like from its ashes. Yet in the depths of her heart, a spiritual whisper lingered, redemption eternal, but ever tested by the wild's unyielding truths. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.